"You're too small, but it's last time." The cowboy told his trembling Apache bride the land stretched wide and quiet under the fading light of the evening sky. The wind moved softly through dry grass and low hills, carrying the smell of dust and old earth. A lone cowboy rode slowly across the open ground, his horse's hooves making a steady sound that felt like the only heartbeat in a world that had forgotten how to speak. He had lived this way for many years, riding from one place to another, never staying long, never letting anyone get close. The land was his home, and the silence was his only companion. He had learned to trust the signs of the land, a broken branch, a strange mark in the dirt, or a shadow that moved when it should not. That evening, something felt different. The air felt heavy, as if it was holding a secret. His horse slowed on its own, ears turning forward, sensing something ahead. The cowboy followed its gaze and saw a small figure standing near a cluster of rocks at the edge of a dry stream. At first, he thought it was a child. The figure stood still, wrapped in a simple blanket, dark hair moving slightly in the wind. But as he rode closer, he saw it was a young woman. Her eyes were wide, and her hands were held close to her chest, as if she was trying to protect herself from the world around her. She looked tired, and her face showed the kind of fear that came from running for too long. He stopped his horse a few steps away. He did not reach for his weapon. He only watched her, trying to understand what had brought her here, to this lonely place where even travelers rarely came. The land around them felt empty, but the space between them felt full of questions. She spoke first, her voice soft and unsure. She asked if she was standing on his land. He nodded slowly. He told her that this was not a safe place to be alone, especially as night was coming. He could see her shoulders shake when he said this, as if she already knew danger was near, but did not know where else to go. He noticed the way she looked behind her, as if expecting someone to appear from the hills at any moment. The cowboy had seen that look before in people who were being followed. He had once worn it himself, many years ago, when he ran from a past he could not fix. That memory made his chest feel tight, and for a moment he forgot the rule he had made for himself to never get involved. He told her she should keep moving, that staying here would only bring trouble. The words came out harder than he meant them to. He saw her flinch, and he knew he had touched a wound he could not see. She lowered her eyes and said she had been moving for days, maybe longer, and her feet could not carry her much farther. The sky grew darker, turning from soft orange to deep blue. The first stars began to appear, small and quiet, like they were watching from far away. The cowboy looked at the land around them, and then back at her. He could leave. That was the easy choice. He had made it many times before. But something about her standing there, alone against the wide world, made him stay. He told her she could rest near his fire for one night. Only one night, he said. When morning came, she would have to go. She nodded quickly, grateful for even a small kindness. She followed him to a simple camp he had set up near a group of trees that offered a little shelter from the wind. He built the fire while she sat on a rock, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. The flames grew, casting warm light on her face. In that light he could see she was not as young as he first thought, but her tired eyes made her look smaller, as if the world had pressed down on her for too long. They ate in silence at first. He gave her some of the food he carried, and she accepted it with careful hands, as if she was afraid it might disappear if she moved too fast. The sound of the fire and the night insects filled the space between them. The cowboy felt the old weight in his chest, the one he always carried, grow a little lighter. After a while, she spoke again. She told him her name and where she came from, though she kept some details to herself. She said she had been promised to someone she did not choose, and when the time came to go, she ran instead. She did not speak with anger, only with a quiet sadness that felt deeper than anger could ever be. The cowboy listened, his eyes on the fire. He knew the feeling of having your path chosen for you by someone else. He knew the fear of stepping away from what everyone expected. He wanted to tell her that running was not always the answer, but he also knew that sometimes it was the only way to breathe. He told her that the land was not kind to those who traveled alone. He said that people who chased often did not stop easily. The words came out as a warning, but also as a promise that he would not turn away if trouble found them. She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if trying to see past the dust and the worn clothes to the man inside. She asked why he lived so far from everyone else. He hesitated. That was a question he had not answered for himself in a long time. He said he had lost people he cared about, and staying close to others only reminded him of what was gone. The land did not ask him to remember. The land only asked him to survive. She nodded, as if she understood more than he expected. The night grew colder, and the wind picked up. He offered her his coat, and she tried to refuse, but he placed it over her shoulders anyway. Her hands trembled as she pulled it close. He told her she was safe for now, though he did not know if that was true. He only knew that he wanted it to be. As the fire burned lower, he sat with his back against a tree, watching the dark edges of the camp. Every sound made him alert. He knew that if someone was following her, they would not be far behind. The land could hide many things, but it could not hide footsteps forever. She fell asleep near the fire, her face finally relaxed, free from the fear that had followed her for so long. The cowboy watched her for a moment, then looked up at the stars. He remembered a time when he believed the world could be simple, when he thought the sky held answers instead of questions. He told himself that this was only for one night. In the morning, she would leave, and he would go back to his quiet life. But as he sat there, listening to her steady breathing and the soft crackle of the fire, he felt something change inside him. Morning came slowly, like it did not want to wake the land too fast. Pale light touched the hills and slid across the quiet ground. The cowboy opened his eyes and felt the cool air on his face. The fire had turned to soft gray ash, and the night sounds had faded into the gentle calls of birds far away. He sat up and looked toward the place where the woman had slept. She was still there, wrapped in his coat, her dark hair spread across the blanket beneath her. For a moment he just watched her breathe. It felt strange to see another person in his camp after so long. His life had been made of open space and long rides, not shared mornings and quiet company. She woke when she felt his eyes on her. She sat up quickly, as if she had forgotten where she was. Then she saw him and relaxed a little. She gave a small, careful smile and handed him his coat. He told her she could keep it until the day warmed up. They ate the last of the food he had carried, and he packed his things in silence. He told himself again that this was where their paths would split. She needed to keep moving, and he needed to return to the land he knew. But when he looked at her, standing there with the wide world in front of her and nowhere clear to go, the choice did not feel as simple as it should have been. She asked which way led to the nearest town. He pointed toward a line of hills far in the distance. He told her it would take a full day to reach it on foot, maybe more. Her face fell, but she nodded like she had expected nothing less. He mounted his horse and turned away, ready to ride off. But the sound of her footsteps behind him made him stop. She called his name, soft but steady. He turned back and saw her standing there, holding the blanket in her hands like it was the only thing keeping her standing. She asked if he knew of any safer path, any place where someone like her could disappear for a while. He looked at the land around them, then at her tired eyes. He thought of the men who might still be searching. He thought of the empty cabin he had built near the river, far from any road or trail. He told her he knew a place. He did not say why the words came out of his mouth. He only knew that once they did, there was no taking them back. They traveled together as the sun climbed higher. She walked at first, but the ground was rough, and her steps grew slower. After a while, he offered her a place on his horse. She hesitated, then accepted. She sat behind him, holding the saddle, careful not to lean too close. The space between them felt small and large at the same time. The land changed as they rode. Dry ground gave way to patches of green, and the air grew cooler near the river. The sound of flowing water filled the quiet, and for the first time since he had met her, she laughed. It was a soft sound, like it was not used to being heard. It made something in his chest shift. They reached the cabin in the afternoon. It was small and simple, built from old wood and stone. Smoke did not rise from its roof, and no path led to its door. It was a place meant to be forgotten. He helped her down from the horse and showed her inside. There was a small table, 2 chairs, and a bed made from rough boards and a thin mattress. It was not much, but her eyes filled with relief when she saw it. She thanked him in a voice that felt heavy with more than words. He told her she could stay for a short time, just until she found her strength again. He did not say how long that might be. He did not know himself. Days passed in a slow, gentle way. He brought water from the river and food from his hunts. She cleaned the cabin and fixed small things that had been broken or forgotten. They spoke more now, sharing pieces of their past in careful parts. He told her about the people he had lost and how he had chosen the land over the pain of memory. She told him about her family, her home, and the moment she knew she could not walk the path others had chosen for her. Sometimes they sat outside in the evening and watched the sky change colors. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt calm, like a place where words were not always needed. But peace does not last forever in a wide and restless world. One afternoon, while he was checking his traps near the edge of the river, he found a mark in the dirt that did not belong there, a footprint, deep and fresh. He followed it and found another, and then another. His chest tightened. He knew someone had been near. He rode back to the cabin fast, the wind cutting against his face. When he reached it, she was standing outside, looking toward the hills with worry in her eyes. She had felt it too, the change in the air, the quiet that comes before trouble. He told her they could not stay much longer. The land had spoken, and it was not a kind message. She nodded, though fear flashed across her face. She asked where they would go. He did not have an answer. The world felt suddenly very large again. That night, they sat by the fire inside the cabin. The light danced on the walls, and shadows moved like silent watchers. She told him she was tired of running. She said she did not want to live her life always looking over her shoulder. He listened, feeling the weight of her words. He told her that standing still could be just as dangerous as moving. But he also knew that a person can only run for so long before their heart gives out. She looked at him and asked if he would leave if she stayed. The question hung between them, simple and heavy at the same time. He did not answer right away. He thought of the open land, the long roads, the quiet nights under the stars. He thought of the cabin, the river, and the sound of her soft laughter. He realized that the world he had built for himself had already changed, even if he did not want to admit it. He told her he would not leave her alone. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying a distant sound that could have been anything or nothing at all. They both went quiet, listening. The night felt different, like it was holding its breath. The morning felt heavy before the sun even rose. The air inside the cabin was still, like it was waiting for something to happen. The cowboy woke first. He sat up slowly and listened. The river outside moved as always, calm and steady, but beneath that sound, he felt a quiet tension in the land. He stepped outside and looked at the hills. The sky was pale, and mist hung low near the ground. He took a slow walk around the cabin, checking the dirt near the door, the edge of the trees, and the soft ground by the river. He found more marks, faint but clear enough for someone who knew how to read the land. Someone had been close in the night. He went back inside and woke the woman gently. She opened her eyes and saw the look on his face. She did not need him to speak. She already knew. They packed what little they had. He told her they would move before the sun climbed too high. The light of day could make them easier to see. She nodded and folded the blanket carefully, like she did not know when she might feel safe enough to rest again. They rode together, the horse moving at a steady pace along the river at first, then turning toward a narrow path that led into higher ground. Trees grew thicker there, and the land rose in slow waves of stone and soil. The path was rough, but it was hidden from open sight. The woman held on to the saddle, her hands tight. She did not speak much. Her eyes moved from side to side, watching every shadow, every break in the trees. The cowboy kept his eyes forward, but his mind worked in all directions. He listened for sounds that did not belong. By midday they reached a rocky area where the ground was hard and dry. Tracks would be harder to follow there. He stopped the horse and helped her down. They rested in the shade of a tall stone wall shaped by wind and time. She drank water and tried to calm her breathing. He watched the land around them, his hand never far from his side. The world felt too quiet, like even the birds were holding back their songs. She finally broke the silence. She asked him why he stayed with her when he could have left the first night. He looked at the stone in front of him and thought for a moment. He told her that he once ran from something he loved because he was afraid of losing it. He said that living alone felt safer than caring for someone and risking pain. But when he saw her standing in the open land, tired and scared, he felt like he was seeing his own past in her eyes. She listened closely, her face soft with understanding. She told him she had always believed being strong meant never needing anyone, but the days with him had shown her that strength could also mean trusting someone enough to stand beside them. Their words made the space between them feel smaller, warmer, even in the wide and cold land. A sound broke the moment. The cowboy heard it first, a faint echo of a footstep against stone. He stood up slowly and placed a hand out to stop her from moving. His eyes scanned the rocks, the trees, the open sky above the path. Then he saw them. Two figures stood far back on the trail they had taken. They were small in the distance, but clear enough to tell they were following. The woman's breath caught in her throat when she saw them. He did not panic. He did not raise his voice. He only took her hand and led her toward a narrow break in the rocks. They moved carefully, keeping low, using the land as cover. The stone walls grew closer together, forming a natural passage that curved out of sight. They stayed there, hidden, listening. The footsteps grew louder. Voices carried on the wind, low and rough. The cowboy could not hear the words, but he knew the tone. It was the sound of people who believed they were close to what they were looking for. The woman's hand trembled in his. He squeezed it gently, a silent promise that she was not alone. The figures passed by the narrow passage without seeing them. The sound of their steps faded slowly, like a storm moving away instead of toward them. They stayed still for a long time after the land went quiet again. Only when he was sure the danger had moved on did he guide her back into the open. They did not go back the way they had come. They turned higher into the hills, where the land became rough and wild. The path was hard, and the climb took much of their strength. But the higher they went, the more hidden they became. As the sun began to fall, they reached a wide ledge that looked out over a valley. Trees filled the low ground, and the river cut a silver line through the green. It was beautiful, but it did not feel like a place to rest. They made a small fire, hidden behind rocks, so the light would not travel far. They ate in silence, both tired, both thinking about how close the day had come to ending in a very different way. The woman spoke again, her voice quiet. She said she was afraid that no matter where they went, the past would always find her. She asked if there was any place in the world where a person could truly start over. The cowboy looked at the sky, now painted with deep red and purple colors. He told her that places do not give people new beginnings. People give them to themselves. The land can only offer space. What someone builds in that space is what matters. She thought about his words for a long time. That night, they took turns keeping watch. When it was his turn to sleep, he dreamed of long roads and open skies. When it was her turn, she sat with her back against a rock, watching the stars move slowly across the dark. She realized that even though fear still lived in her heart, it no longer lived alone. Hope had found a place there too. In the early hours before dawn, the cowboy woke to a sound that did not belong to the wind or the river. He sat up, alert, and listened. Far below, in the valley, a small light moved through the trees. Someone was still searching. He looked at the woman who was watching the same light. Their eyes met in the dark. No words were needed. The journey was not over. The morning light came slowly over the hills, soft and pale, like it did not want to wake the world too fast. The cowboy and the woman stood on the rocky ledge and watched the valley below. The small, moving light from the night before was gone, but the feeling it left behind still rested heavy in the air. They knew they could not stay where they were. The cowboy helped her down from the ledge, and they began their way across the high ground. The land here was rough, filled with stones and tall grass that brushed against their legs. The wind moved freely, carrying every sound far and wide. It was not a good place to hide, but it was a good place to see what was coming. As they walked, the woman asked where they were going. He told her there was a place far beyond the hills, near a wide bend in the river, where old trees grew close together. He had passed it once long ago. It was quiet and hard to reach, a place where the land itself seemed to stand guard. They moved carefully, stopping often to listen. Every bird that flew up suddenly made their hearts jump. Every rustle in the grass felt like a warning. The world had become a place of signs and shadows. By midday, the sun was strong, and the heat pressed down on them. They rested under the shade of a large tree with roots that spread like fingers across the ground. The woman drank from their last water skin and wiped her face with the edge of the blanket. She looked tired, but there was something new in her eyes. It was not only fear anymore. It was determination. She told him she did not want to keep running in circles. She said she wanted to choose where she stood, even if danger still found her there. The cowboy listened and nodded. He said the land respected people who chose their own ground. As they stood to leave, he noticed something in the dirt near the tree, a broken branch, fresh and green. Someone had passed through here not long ago. They moved faster after that. The land began to change as they went lower. The grass grew taller and trees appeared more often. their branches reaching across the path like quiet watchers. The air felt cooler, and the sound of water grew stronger. They reached the river in the late afternoon. It was wider here, slow and deep, reflecting the sky like a long mirror. The cowboy led the horse into the water, testing the ground with each step. The woman held onto him as they crossed, the cold water rising to their knees. On the other side, they climbed up a narrow bank and found a place where the trees stood close together, just like he had remembered. The light inside this small forest was soft and broken, scattered by leaves and branches. It felt like a hidden world within the open land. They stopped there, both breathing easier for the first time in days. They built a small shelter from branches and leaves, something simple that blended into the land. The cowboy showed her how to place the branches so rain would run off instead of inside. She watched carefully and helped, her hands learning the shape of survival. As the sun lowered, they sat near a small fire hidden between stones. The woman looked around at the trees, the river just beyond, and the quiet ground beneath them. She said this place felt different. It felt like it could be a beginning instead of another stop. The cowboy did not answer right away. He stared into the fire and thought about all the places he had passed through in his life. None of them had ever asked him to stay. This one felt like it might. The calm did not last long. A sound carried through the trees, faint but clear enough for him to hear. A branch snapping. He stood up slowly and raised his hand to stop her from moving. His eyes searched the shadows between the trunks. Then he saw a shape move near the edge of the trees. He stepped forward, putting himself between the woman and the sound. His heart beat hard, but his face stayed calm. He called out, his voice steady, asking who was there. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a figure stepped into the light. It was one of the men who had been following them. His clothes were dusty, and his eyes were sharp. He looked past the cowboy, trying to see the woman behind him. The cowboy told him they were on private ground, and that he should turn back. The man laughed softly and said he was only looking for someone who had gone missing. The woman's breath caught behind him, but she did not step away. The cowboy said the land was wide and full of lost people, and this one did not belong to him. The man's smile faded. He took a step closer, and the air between them felt tight and ready to break. Before anything could happen, another voice called from deeper in the trees. The man hesitated and looked back. He seemed to weigh his choice, then took a step away instead of forward. He said they would meet again. The man turned and disappeared into the shadows, his footsteps fading slowly. The woman let out a breath she had been holding. Her legs felt weak, and she sat down on a fallen log. The cowboy knelt in front of her and asked if she was all right. She nodded, though her hand still shook. She told him she had never had someone stand in front of her like that before. She said she had always been the one expected to follow, to move where others pointed. He told her that everyone deserves someone who will stand with them, not over them or behind them. The night came quietly after that. The trees around them glowed softly under the moonlight, and the river whispered its steady song. They took turns watching the dark, but no more shapes moved between the trees. In the calm, they spoke about the future, not in big plans, but in small ideas. She talked about learning the land, growing food, building something that could last. He talked about teaching her what he knew, and maybe learning something new himself. For the first time, the future did not feel like an empty road. It felt like a place they might walk together. As the fire burned low, the woman looked at the cowboy and asked him a question that had been sitting in her heart for a long time. She asked what he would do if the danger finally passed. He thought about it. He thought about the open land, the long rides, and the quiet nights under the stars. Then he looked at the small shelter they had built, the river nearby, and her face in the firelight. He said he might finally stop running too. She smiled, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. A night wrapped around them, calm and deep. The world outside their small circle of lights still held danger and questions, but inside it there was something steady and warm. They did not know what the next day would bring. They only knew they would face it together, standing on the ground they had chosen, under a sky that no longer felt so far away. The morning came with a soft rain that touched the leaves in the ground like a gentle whisper. The drops slid down the branches and fell into the river, making small circles that spread and disappeared. The cowboy woke to the sound and sat up slowly. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he saw the small shelter, the trees around them, and the woman sleeping near the fire that had turned to gray ash. He felt a quiet peace in his chest, the kind he had not known in a long time. She woke soon after, stretching and pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw the rain. She said it felt like the land was washing away the past, even if only for a moment. He nodded and handed her a piece of dried food. They ate together, listening to the river and the rain. The world felt calm, but he knew calm did not always mean safe. He stepped outside the shelter and walked the edge of the trees, looking for signs in the dirt and broken leaves. He found none. The land had gone quiet again, not the tense quiet of danger, but the deep quiet of a place that had settled into itself. When he came back, she was standing near the river, watching the water move around stones and fallen branches. She asked if they could stay here for a while, maybe long enough to see what the land would allow them to build. He looked around. The trees were strong. The river was steady. The ground was rich and dark. It was not an easy place, but it was a good one. He told her they could try. They spent the day working. He showed her how to cut branches in a way that would not harm the trees too much. She gathered fallen wood and leaves to make the shelter stronger. They worked side by side, not talking much, but sharing the quiet like it was something they both understood. By afternoon, the rain had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds. The small shelter looked more like a home now, with walls that could block the wind and a roof that did not let water fall inside. She stepped back and looked at what they had made. Her eyes filled with a soft light. She said it was not much, but it was theirs. The words stayed with him. Theirs. As the sun began to fall, they heard a sound from across the river. It was not loud, but it was clear. A voice calling out. The cowboy stood still, his heart beating hard. The woman moved closer to him, her hand finding his arm without thinking. They waited, listening. The voice called again, closer this time. He stepped forward and raised his hand, letting the person see him. A man came into view on the other side of the river. He looked tired and worn, his clothes dusty, his eyes uncertain. He did not look like the others who had been searching. The man called out and said he was lost. He asked if they knew the way to the nearest road. The cowboy studied him carefully. He did not see hunger or anger in the man's face, only confusion and fear. He pointed toward the hills and told him which path would lead back to the open land. The man thanked him and turned away, disappearing into the trees on the far side of the river. The woman let out a breath she had been holding. She said not everyone in the world was a threat. The cowboy nodded. He said sometimes the land sent people to remind them of that. That night, they sat by the fire and talked about small things. She told him stories from her childhood, about running through tall grass and listening to elders speak about the sky and the earth. He told her about the first horse he had ever ridden and the long road he took after he lost his family. They did not rush their words. They let the silence between them hold the parts that did not need to be spoken. The days that followed were simple and steady. They learned the shape of the land together. They found a place where wild plants grew near the river. They built a small fence to keep animals away from their shelter. They laughed when their work did not go as planned, and tried again the next day. No one came searching. The woman began to walk the land with more confidence. Her steps grew stronger, her eyes lifted from the ground to the sky. She no longer flinched at every sound. The fear that had once lived in her like a shadow began to fade. The cowboy felt something change inside him too. He no longer woke with the need to ride away. He no longer felt the pull of the open road in the same way. The land around them did not feel like a place to pass through. It felt like a place to stand. One evening, as the sun painted the river in gold and red, she stood beside him and said she had been thinking about her past. She said she did not want to forget it, but she did not want it to decide her future either. He told her the past was like a river. It always flowed behind you, but it did not have to pull you back. She smiled at that. That night the sky was clear, and the stars shone bright. They lay on the ground near the fire, looking up. She pointed at a group of stars and said it looked like a bird in flight. He said he had always thought it looked like a road. They laughed, and the sound carried softly through the trees. In the weeks that followed, the land began to change with the season. The air grew cooler, the leaves turned colors and fell into the river. The small shelter grew into something stronger, with walls made from logs and a door that kept out the wind. They worked together every day, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. One morning the cowboy woke before the sun. He stepped outside and saw the woman standing near the river, her reflection moving with the water. He walked up beside her, and they watched the first light touch the hills. She turned to him and said she had never imagined a life like this, one where she chose where to stand, where to wake, where to build. He told her he had never imagined staying in one place long enough to see the land change around him. They stood there, quiet and steady, like the river itself. The world beyond their small home still existed. There were roads, towns, and people with their own stories and troubles. But here, in this place they had chosen, there was something simple and strong. As the sun rose fully into the sky, the cowboy realized that the land no longer felt lonely. It felt full. The woman looked at him and said she did not feel like she was running anymore. She felt like she was living. He reached out and took her hand, not as someone who needed saving, and not as someone who needed to protect, but as someone who had chosen to walk the same path. They turned back toward their home, the river behind them, and the open sky above. The future was still unknown, still wide and full of questions, but for the first time, they did not face it alone. They faced it together, on ground they had claimed not with force, but with patience, trust, and the simple strength of staying when the world once told them to run.